The sky above Kepler 442 burned with streaks of fire as dozens of metal pods screamed through the atmosphere. Each one shook violently as it fell, the heat shields glowing red-hot against the friction of atmospheric entry. Inside one of these pods, Captain Jake Morrison gripped the harness strap so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His teeth rattled in his skull from the brutal shaking, and every bone in his body felt like it was being compressed by an invisible hand. This was not how drop pods were supposed to be used. They were designed for short-range insertions from low orbit, not this insane plunge from the edge of the solar system. Jake knew that half his battalion was probably already dead, their pods burning up or breaking apart during the descent. But they had no choice. The colony needed help now, not in 3 weeks when the main fleet could arrive. The pod slammed into the ground with such force that Jake's vision went black for a moment. Alarm screamed in his helmet and he could taste blood in his mouth. He forced himself to breathe, to move, to think. The explosive bolts fired with a sharp crack, and the pod's side panel blew outward. Fresh air rushed in, along with the acrid smell of burned metal and scorched earth. Jake unbuckled himself and stumbled out of the pod, his legs shaking. He immediately dropped to one knee and brought up his rifle, scanning for threats. The landscape around him was a nightmare of smoking craters where other pods had landed. Some were intact. Others were nothing but twisted metal and fire. Sound off. Jake barked into his radio. All units report in. The responses came in slowly, voices strained and shaky. Lieutenant Nicole Perry reported from 300 meters away with her squad mostly intact. Sergeant Danny Cruz had landed near the colony's eastern perimeter with 8 soldiers. Corporal Lisa Grant, their medic, had survived, but her pod had landed upside down and she was still digging herself out. Jake did a quick mental count as more voices checked in. 63. Out. Of the 140 soldiers who had loaded into pods aboard the ship, only 63 had survived the drop. The number hit him like a physical blow, but he forced himself to focus. Those 63 were alive and they had a job to do. All units move to Rally Point Alpha, Jake ordered. Stay low and stay alert. We've got Vricks in the area. He stood up and started moving, his body protesting every step. Around him, other soldiers emerged from their pods, looking dazed and battered but alive. They formed up automatically, falling into the training that had been drilled into them over years of service. Even in the chaos, they moved like professionals. The colony's main settlement was visible in the distance, a cluster of prefabricated buildings and dome structures that housed 3,000 civilians. Above it, hovering in the sky like predatory birds, were 3 massive Vricks dropships. They were ugly things, all angles and dark metal, and they were in the process of landing near the colony's central hub. Jake's radio crackled. Captain Morrison, this is Colony Administrator Helen Brooks. Please tell me I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. You are, ma'am, Jake replied, still moving toward the rally point. Earth Defense Force, 7th Rapid Response Battalion. We picked up your distress call and came as fast as we could. There was a long pause on the other end. When Helen spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. You came. Dear God, you actually came. We thought we were alone. You're not alone, ma'am. But I need you to listen carefully. How many Vricks are on the ground? We estimate 800 warriors plus support personnel. They gave us 48 hours to surrender, but that deadline passed 3 hours ago. They're starting to round people up now for transport to their ships. Jake cursed under his breath. 800 against 63. Those were terrible odds, even for humans. What about weapons? Defenses? We're a mining colony, Captain. We have some security personnel with basic arms, but nothing that could stop a Vricks assault. Most of our defenses are against wildlife, not military forces. Jake reached the rally point, a shallow depression that offered some cover from orbital observation. His soldiers were gathering there, helping each other out of damaged armor and redistributing ammunition. Nicole approached him, her face bruised and a cut above her left eye bleeding down her cheek. Orders, sir? She asked. Jake looked at his assembled force. They were beaten up, low on ammunition, and outnumbered more than 10 to 1. Any sane commander would try to evacuate the civilians and retreat into the wilderness. But Jake had not dropped out of the sky to run away. We're going to dig in and make those scaled bastards bleed for every meter of ground, Jake said. Nicole, I need you to assess our heavy weapons. What survived the drop? 2 portable missile launchers, 4 heavy machine guns, and about half our demolition charges, Nicole reported. We lost most of the anti-armor equipment. It'll have to be enough. Danny? Jake called out. The sergeant jogged over, moving with a slight limp. I need you to take 3 squads and set up defensive positions along the colony's eastern approach. Use the terrain, dig in deep, and prepare for a sustained fight. Yes, sir, Danny replied. What about the civilians? I'm about to discuss that with the administrator. Jake switched his radio back to Helen's frequency. Ma'am, I need you to start evacuating your people to a more defensible position. What's the strongest structure in your colony? The mining complex on the north side, Helen answered immediately. It has underground tunnels and reinforced walls designed to withstand cave-ins. But Captain, there's no way we can move 3,000 people without the Vrix noticing. We'll give you cover. Start moving them now quietly. Use the tunnels if you have them. We'll keep the Vrix busy. Jake ended the transmission and gathered his squad leaders. They huddled in the depression, and he sketched out a rough map in the dirt with his finger. Here's the situation. We need to buy time for the civilians to evacuate. That means we need to hit the Vrix hard enough to make them focus on us instead of the population centers. That's suicide, sir, one of the squad leaders said bluntly. We don't have the firepower for an assault. I'm not talking about a frontal assault, Jake replied. I'm talking about making them angry, making them come to us on ground we choose. Nicole, you're going to take 2 squads and hit their landing zone with everything we have. Missiles, grenades, whatever it takes. Make noise. Make them think we're a bigger force than we are. Nicole nodded slowly. A spoiling attack. Get them disorganized before they can mount an assault on the colony proper. Exactly. While they're focused on you, I'll take the rest of our forces and establish defensive positions at the mining complex. When you've caused enough chaos, fall back to our lines. We'll be ready for them. What about air support? Danny asked. Those dropships can tear us apart from the sky. Lisa, Jake called out. The medic approached, her uniform covered in dirt from crawling out of her pod. I need you to work with the colony's engineers. See if there's anything we can use to create interference or jamming. Those dropships rely on targeting computers. If we can blind them, we level the playing field. Lisa nodded. I'll see what I can do, sir. Jake looked at each of his officers in turn. I won't lie to you. This is going to be brutal. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and we have no reinforcements coming. But those people down there are counting on us. They sent out a distress call thinking nobody would come, thinking they would die alone on this rock. We're here to show them that humans don't abandon their own. Are you with me? The response was immediate and unanimous. Yes, sir. Then let's get to work. We've got a colony to save. As his soldiers moved out to their assigned positions, Jake took one last look at the smoking craters where so many of his people had died during the drop. He made a silent promise to them and to himself. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. The Vrix were about to learn a hard lesson about what happened when you threatened humans. They were about to learn that when you corner a human, when you threaten their families and their homes, they don't surrender, they fight. And they fight dirty. Jake checked his rifle one more time and started moving toward the colony. Behind him, the first explosions echoed across the valley as Nicole's attack began. The battle for Kepler 442 had started, and Jake intended to make sure the Vrix remembered it for a very long time. The mining complex was a sprawling structure built into the side of a rocky hill. Its entrance was wide enough for heavy equipment to pass through, and the tunnels inside stretched deep into the earth where colonists had been extracting rare minerals for the past 5 years. Jake stood at the entrance watching as streams of civilians hurried inside, carrying children and whatever possessions they could grab in their rush to evacuate. Helen Brooks stood beside him, her face tight with worry. She was a small woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her dark hair, but Jake could see the strength in her eyes. She had kept her people alive this long through courage and smart decisions. We're getting everyone inside as fast as we can, Helen said. But Captain, even with these tunnels, if the Vrix decide to bombard us from orbit, these walls won't hold. Then we make sure they don't want to bombard, Jake replied. Those tunnels have valuable minerals in them. The Vrix came here for resources and slave labor, not to destroy everything. As long as we make a ground assault costly enough, they'll hesitate to level the place. Helen looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. You really think 63 soldiers can hold off 800 Vrix warriors? I think we don't have a choice but to try. The sound of explosions echoed from the south, where Nicole's squads were attacking the Vrix landing zones. Jake checked his radio, listening to the chatter as his lieutenant coordinated her assault. They had hit the dropships with missiles and scattered the Vrix forces that were beginning to form up for their own advance. It was a good start, but Jake knew the Vrix would recover quickly. "Sir, we've got movement." Danny's voice crackled over the radio. "Vrix patrols, 3 groups moving toward the colony's eastern edge. They're searching for us. Hold your fire until they're in the kill zone," Jake ordered. "Let them come to us." He turned to find Gordon Hayes, the colony's chief engineer, approaching with a tablet in his hands. Gordon was a tall man with a thick beard and hands that were permanently stained with machine oil. He had the look of someone who spent more time with equipment than with people. "Captain, I've been looking at your request about creating interference," Gordon said. "We have an atmospheric processor that generates a pretty strong electromagnetic field. It's designed to help terraform the planet over time, but if I can modify the output frequency, I might be able to create enough disruption to mess with their targeting computers. How long will it take?" 6 hours, maybe 8. "I'll need help, and I'll need it done on the surface. The processor won't work if it's buried down here in the tunnels." Jake frowned. That meant keeping people exposed while they worked. "Do it. Take whoever you need. I'll assign a fire team to protect you while you work." Gordon nodded and headed back into the complex. Jake watched him go, then returned his attention to the defensive perimeter. His soldiers were digging in, using mining equipment to create firing positions and reinforcing them with whatever materials they could find. It was not textbook military engineering, but it would have to do. Lisa appeared at his elbow, her medical bag slung over one shoulder. "I've set up a triage station in the main tunnel. The colonists have some medical supplies, but not enough for a prolonged engagement. We're going to run out of bandages and painkillers fast if we take heavy casualties. Prioritize the wounded. Save what you can for the soldiers, but don't let civilians die if you can help them." "Understood, sir." Jake climbed up onto a pile of rubble to get a better view of the approaches to the mining complex. From here, he could see the kill zones they had established. The ground sloped up toward the entrance, meaning any attacking force would have to advance uphill under fire. The flanks were protected by rocky outcroppings that would channel the Vrix into narrow approach routes. It was a decent defensive position, but Jake knew it would not be enough. The Vrix had numbers, air support, and orbital weapons. All the humans had was determination and the willingness to make every meter of ground cost blood. Nicole's voice came over the radio. "We're falling back. They're organizing a counterattack and we've done all the damage we can. We're heading to you now. Copy that. Double time it." "We'll be ready." 20 minutes later, Nicole's squads came running into the defensive perimeter, breathing hard and covered in soot. Nicole herself had a burn mark across her armor where a plasma bolt had nearly hit her. She dropped down next to Jake and took a long drink from her canteen. "We hurt them," she said between breaths. "Destroyed one dropship completely and damaged another. Killed maybe 30 warriors before they could organize. But they're angry now. They'll be coming for us." "Good," Jake said. "Let them come. We're ready." He was not entirely sure that was true, but he had learned long ago that confidence mattered in combat. Soldiers fought better when they believed their commander had a plan, even if that plan was just to hold on and bleed the enemy dry. The first Vrix assault came an hour before sunset. They appeared on the horizon as dark shapes moving in organized formations. The Vrix were reptilian creatures, taller than humans, and covered in natural armor plating that could stop small arms fire. They carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel, and they moved with the confidence of a species that had conquered dozens of worlds. Jake watched them through his rifle scope, counting the advancing warriors. 200, maybe more. They were advancing in a broad line, using standard infantry tactics. No subtlety, no attempt at flanking. They simply intended to overwhelm the human position with superior numbers. "Hold your fire," Jake said calmly into the radio. "Wait for my command." The Vrix came closer, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Jake could see their eyes now, cold and reptilian, filled with the certainty of victory. They had probably crushed dozens of human colonies before this one. They expected the humans to break and run. They were going to be disappointed. "Fire!" Jake shouted. The defensive line erupted in a storm of gunfire. Rifles cracked, machine guns roared, and explosions rippled through the advancing Vrix formations as the mines Nicole had planted detonated. The Vrix reacted with shock, their neat formations dissolving into chaos as warriors fell by the dozens. But they did not break. Vrix warriors were disciplined and trained, and they had courage even if Jake hated to admit it. They returned fire, plasma bolts sizzling through the air and exploding against the defensive positions. One of Jake's soldiers screamed as a bolt caught him in the shoulder, burning through his armor and flesh. "Medic!" someone shouted. Lisa was already moving, running in a crouch to reach the wounded soldier while plasma fire kicked up dirt around her feet. She dragged him back behind cover and started working on him immediately, her hands steady despite the chaos. The Vrix pushed forward, trying to close the distance. Jake fired methodically, each shot aimed and deliberate. His rifle barked 3 times and 3 Vrix fell, each with a bullet through the weak point in their neck armor. Beside him, Danny operated a heavy machine gun, sweeping it back and forth across the approaching warriors and cutting them down in groups. "Left flank," Nicole shouted. "They're trying to circle around." Jake turned and saw a group of Vrix attempting to use the rocky outcroppings for cover as they moved to attack the defensive line from the side. He grabbed 2 soldiers and led them at a run to intercept, firing as they moved. The Vrix were fast, but the humans were faster. They reached the outcroppings first and opened fire at point-blank range. The fight was brutal and short. Jake killed 2 Vrix with his rifle, then drew his sidearm and shot a third that was trying to flank him. One of his soldiers went down with a plasma bolt to the chest, dead before he hit the ground. The other soldier, a young woman named Amy Ross, fought with savage intensity, using her rifle like a club when a Vrix warrior got too close. They held the flank, but barely. Jake looked back at the main defensive line and saw his soldiers fighting desperately to hold their positions. The Vrix were taking terrible casualties, but they kept coming. For every warrior that fell, another stepped over the body and continued the advance. Then something changed. The Vrix advance faltered. Their commander, a large warrior with elaborate markings on his armor, was shouting orders and pulling his forces back. They retreated in good order, dragging their wounded with them and leaving their dead where they fell. Jake watched them go, breathing hard. His hands were shaking from adrenaline. Around him, his soldiers were checking ammunition and calling out status reports. The defensive line had held, but at a cost. 9 soldiers were dead, and another 7 were wounded badly enough to be out of the fight. "Why did they pull back?" Nicole asked, appearing at Jake's side. "They could have pushed through. We were almost out of ammunition." "They didn't know that," Jake replied. "They took heavier casualties than they expected, and their commander decided to reassess. But they'll be back. Next time with more warriors and a better plan." Helen Brooks emerged from the tunnel entrance, her face pale. "Captain, we counted the casualties. 15 civilians died in the crossfire and dozens more are wounded. I've got families down there asking me how long we can hold. What do I tell them?" Jake looked at her, seeing the weight of command in her eyes. He knew that weight well. "Tell them we're not done fighting. Tell them that Earth." Warcloth X stood on the command deck of his flagship and stared at the tactical display with barely contained rage. The hologram showed the human defensive position at the mining complex marked in red, surrounded by the bodies of 70 of his warriors. 70. From a force that numbered less than 100. His second-in-command, Warclaw Drex, approached cautiously. "Commander, the humans fight with unexpected ferocity. Perhaps we should—" "Silence!" Thex's tail lashed in anger. "You dare suggest retreat? We are Vrix. We have conquered 40 worlds. These humans are nothing but prey that has forgotten its place." "Yes, Commander." Drex lowered his head in submission. "What are your orders?" Thex studied the display, his mind working through the tactical problem. The humans had chosen their ground well and fought with discipline that surprised him. But they were still just humans. Soft creatures from a weak world who had only recently achieved space travel. They could not stand against the might of the Vrix Dominion. "We will crush them," Thex declared. "At dawn, we attack with full force. 400 warriors on the ground, supported by orbital bombardment. We will burn them out of their holes and take the survivors as examples of what happens when prey resists." Drex hesitated. "Commander, orbital bombardment will destroy the mining facilities. Command wanted those resources intact." "Command wants this world pacified," Thex snapped. "We cannot control a population that believes resistance is possible. We will make an example here that will be remembered on every human colony in the sector. Now go, prepare the assault." As Drex left, Thex turned back to the display. He would admit only to himself that these humans had earned a measure of respect. They fought well for prey, but respect would not save them. Nothing would save them. In the tunnels beneath the mining complex, Jake Morrison sat on an empty ammunition crate and tried to ignore the exhaustion that was pulling at his body. He had not slept in 36 hours, and every muscle ached from the brutal drop and the fighting that followed. But sleep would have to wait. Gordon Hayes appeared from one of the side tunnels, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "Captain, I need to talk to you." Jake looked up. "Is the electromagnetic device ready?" "Almost. Another 3 hours and we can activate it. But there's a problem." Gordon sat down on another crate, his shoulders slumped with weariness. The device needs to be activated from the surface. Someone has to physically start it up and maintain it for at least 10 minutes while it reaches full power. During that time, they'll be completely exposed to Vrix fire and orbital bombardment. "Can't you set it to activate automatically?" "Not without another 12 hours of work, and I don't think we have 12 hours. Gordon met Jake's eyes. "Captain, I built this thing. I know how it works. Let me be the one to activate it." "No," Jake said immediately. "I need you here. If that device breaks down, you're the only one who can fix it." "Then who?" "I'll go," a voice said from the tunnel entrance. Helen Brooks stepped into the light and Jake could see the determination in her face. "I'll activate the device." "Ma'am, with respect, Captain, you need to lead your soldiers. Gordon needs to be ready to make repairs, but I'm the colony administrator. These people are my responsibility." Helen's voice was firm. "I've been giving orders from safety while braver people did the fighting. Let me do this. Let me help protect my colony." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see in her eyes that she had already made up her mind. He had seen that look before, in soldiers who knew they were volunteering for a mission they might not survive. Trying to stop them was like trying to stop the tide. "All right," Jake said quietly. "But you take 2 soldiers with you for security and you follow Gordon's instructions exactly." Helen nodded. "Thank you, Captain." She left to make preparations and Jake stood up, pushing down the guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. He had let a civilian volunteer for a suicide mission. But she was right. Every person here had to contribute if they were going to survive. And Helen Brooks had earned the right to risk her life defending her people. Nicole found him an hour later, as he was checking the defensive positions. "Sir, scouts report massive Vrix movement. They're massing for an assault at dawn. Looks like they're bringing at least 400 warriors." "What about orbital bombardment?" "Probable. They've repositioned their flagship to cover the mining complex. If they decide to glass us from orbit, we won't have any warning." Jake looked at the eastern horizon, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to show. "Then we need to be ready. Pull everyone back into the tunnels except for minimal perimeter guards. When the bombardment starts, we wait it out underground, then hit the Vrix when they come into the complex." "That's a gamble, sir. If the tunnels collapse, we could be buried alive. Everything about this is a gamble. But we're still alive, and that means we're winning." Nicole smiled slightly. "Is that what we're calling it?" "That's exactly what we're calling it. Dawn came with fire from the sky. The orbital bombardment was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Massive plasma bolts rained down from the Vrix flagship, each one hitting with the force of a small bomb. The surface installations were obliterated in seconds. The entrance to the mining complex was partially collapsed by a near miss that sent chunks of rock the size of cars tumbling down. Inside the tunnels, the civilians huddled together in the darkness while the world shook around them. Children cried, and adults tried to comfort them while wondering if the next impact would be the one that brought the mountain down on their heads. Jake's soldiers waited in the deeper tunnels, weapons ready, listening to the bombardment and knowing that soon they would have to face the Vrix assault. Lisa moved through the crowded tunnels, treating the wounded and offering what comfort she could. She had run out of morphine hours ago and was now using local anesthetic, meant for mining accidents. It was not enough, but it was all she had. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, asked her if they were going to die. Lisa told him no. They were going to be fine. The soldiers would protect them. She hoped she was not lying. When the bombardment finally stopped, the silence was almost worse than the noise. Jake emerged from the tunnels with his soldiers, moving cautiously through the dust and smoke. The surface was transformed into a hellscape of craters and burning wreckage. But the tunnels had held. "They were alive. Positions!" Jake shouted. "They'll be coming now." The Vrix came in waves, hundreds of warriors pouring into the shattered mining complex like a flood. Jake's soldiers opened fire from concealed positions in the rubble, but there were simply too many targets. The Vrix pressed forward, accepting casualties that would have broken any human force. Driven by their absolute confidence in victory, Danny held a narrow tunnel junction with 5 soldiers, his machine gun chattering continuously as Vrix warriors tried to force their way through. Bodies piled up in the confined space, creating a wall of corpses, but still they came. When his machine gun ran dry, Danny drew his sidearm and kept firing. When that ran empty, he drew his knife. Nicole led a desperate counterattack through a section of tunnel that had partially collapsed, emerging behind the Vrix advance and causing chaos in their rear. Her squad fought with everything they had, knowing that if the Vrix broke through to the main civilian shelters, it would be a massacre. Jake fought in the center of the defensive line, his rifle empty, using it as a club to beat back Vrix warriors who got too close. Around him, his soldiers were falling. Good men and women who had dropped out of the sky to save strangers and who would never see home again. Each death felt like a personal failure, but Jake could not stop to mourn. He could only keep fighting. On the surface, Helen Brooks and Gordon Hayes reached the electromagnetic device. It sat in the open, surrounded by smoking craters and the bodies of dead Vrix. 2 soldiers, young men named Chris Bell and Luke Gray, provided cover while Gordon worked frantically to activate the device. Plasma fire rained down on them. Chris fell first, a bolt taking him in the chest. Luke kept firing, his rifle barking defiance at the Vrix warriors who were closing in on their position. Gordon's hand shook as he worked the controls, knowing that every second counted. Come on, Gordon muttered, sweat dripping into his eyes. Just a few more seconds. The device came to life with a deep thrumming sound that could be felt in the bones. Electromagnetic energy pulsed outward in waves, invisible but powerful. Throughout the battlefield, Vrix weapons began to malfunction. Their targeting computers flickered and died. Their communications network went silent. Helen saw Gordon smile in triumph just before the plasma bolt hit him. He fell, and Helen dropped beside him, cradling his head. Gordon, stay with me." "Did it work?" Gordon asked, blood on his lips. "Yes," Helen told him, tears streaming down her face. "It worked." "You did it." Gordon's eyes closed, and he was gone. Luke was still firing, but there were too many Vrix. Helen picked up Gordon's rifle, surprised by how heavy it was. She had never fired a weapon in her life, but she had watched the soldiers point and pull the trigger. She could do that. She fired at the approaching Vrix, the rifle bucking against her shoulder. Her shots went wide, but it did not matter. She was buying time for the soldiers to exploit the electromagnetic disruption, time for the civilians to stay safe a little longer. Jake sat in the medical bay watching Lisa work on Helen Brooks. The colony administrator was alive, barely, but the plasma wound in her side was severe. Lisa had done everything she could with the limited medical supplies available, but Helen needed a real hospital with real equipment. None of that existed on Kepler 442. "Will she make it?" Jake asked quietly. Lisa did not look up from her work. "If we can get her to a proper medical facility within 48 hours, yes. If not..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Jake stood and walked out of the medical bay. The tunnels were crowded with exhausted civilians and wounded soldiers. They had survived the second Vrix assault, but the cost had been terrible. Of his original 63 soldiers, only 36 were still combat capable. Ammunition was down to 20%. Medical supplies were almost gone. Food was running low, and the Vrix were still up there in orbit, probably planning their next move. Nicole found him near the collapsed entrance. Soldiers were working to clear the rubble, but it was slow going with only hand tools. "Sir, we need to talk about our situation." "I'm listening. We can't win another fight like that. We just don't have the resources. If the Vrix come at us again with everything they have, we're done." Nicole's voice was matter-of-fact, not defeatist. She was simply stating reality. "I know," Jake admitted. "But what choice do we have? We can't evacuate 3,000 civilians into the wilderness. Most of them would die out there even if the Vrix didn't hunt them down. I'm not suggesting we give up. I'm saying we need a new plan, something that changes the equation." Nicole pulled out a data pad. "I've been analyzing the Vrix fleet positions. Their flagship is the key to everything. It's providing orbital fire support, coordinating their ground forces, and blocking any chance of reinforcements reaching us. So we take out the flagship," Jake said. "Except we don't have any way to reach orbit. Our drop pods are scrap metal. What about the mass driver?" Jake looked at her. The mass driver was a magnetic launching system the colony used to send cargo containers into orbit for pickup by freight ships. It was designed to accelerate cargo to orbital velocity using electromagnetic rails. "You're talking about launching people on that thing," Jake said slowly. "The G-forces alone would be fatal." "Not necessarily. I've been running calculations with Sam Porter. He's one of the colony engineers. If we modify the launch profile, reduce the maximum acceleration, we could make it survivable. Barely. Barely means some of us die during the launch. Some of us are going to die anyway if we don't do something." Nicole met his eyes. "Sir, this is our only shot at ending this. If we can board that flagship and take it out, the Vrix lose their orbital advantage. Without that, they can't bombard us from space, and their ground forces will be cut off from command and control." Jake thought about it. The plan was insane. They would be launching themselves at a heavily defended warship in a cargo container, modified into a makeshift boarding pod. Even if they survived the launch, they would have to fight their way through the ship against overwhelming numbers. And even if they succeeded, they would have no way back down. It was a suicide mission. It was also their only chance. "All right," Jake said. "Put together a boarding team. 6 volunteers, including you and me. We'll need people who can fight in zero gravity and who know their way around ship systems." "Danny's going," Nicole said immediately. "He won't take no for an answer once he hears about this." "Fine, get him and 3 others. We launch at dawn." Nicole left to gather the team and Jake went to find Sam Porter. The young engineer was in one of the deeper tunnels, working on the mass driver's control systems by the light of a portable work lamp. "Mr. Porter, I need you to tell me honestly. Can this work?" Sam looked up, his face smudged with grease. "The math says it can work, Captain. But the math doesn't account for all the things that can go wrong. The launch pod could break apart during acceleration. The targeting could be off by kilometers. The Vrix might shoot us down before we reach the ship. I can give you a 20% chance of success, maybe 30 if we're lucky." "I've gone into fights with worse odds," Jake said. "Make it happen." For the rest of the day, Sam and his team worked on modifying a cargo container into a boarding pod. They reinforced the structure, added basic life support, and installed improvised crash couches made from mining equipment padding. It was crude, but it would have to do. Jake gathered his boarding team that evening. Besides himself, Nicole, and Danny, he had chosen 3 other soldiers. There was Pete Carson, a demolitions expert who could rig explosives in his sleep. There was Amy Ross, the young woman who had fought beside Jake during the first battle and had proven herself fearless. And there was Kevin Blake, a tech specialist who could hack Vrix systems if they captured any intact. "I won't lie to you," Jake told them. "This is a one-way trip. We're not coming back from this, but if we succeed, we save everyone down here. We save the colony. Your families, your friends, every civilian who's counting on us. That has to be enough." "It is enough, sir," Danny said, and the others nodded in agreement. They spent the night preparing. Lisa checked each of them for injuries and gave them stimulants to keep them alert during the mission. Nicole went over the tactical plan, mapping out the likely interior of the Vrix flagship based on captured data. Danny sharpened his knife, the rasp of steel on stone oddly soothing in the quiet tunnel. Jake found himself thinking about home, about Earth, which he had not seen in 3 years, about his family, who probably thought he was dead already. He had never married, never had children. The military had been his life, and now it would be his death. He found that he was okay with that. At dawn, the boarding team assembled at the mass driver. The modified cargo container sat on the rails, looking more like a coffin than a spacecraft. Civilians and soldiers gathered to watch, and Jake could see the hope and fear in their faces. Lisa approached Jake, her eyes red from lack of sleep and too many tears shed over the wounded. "Come back, sir, please." "I'll do my best," Jake told her. He did not make promises he could not keep. Helen Brooks was there too, carried on a stretcher. She was conscious but weak, her face pale from blood loss. She reached out a hand and Jake took it. "Finish this," Helen whispered. "Make them remember what it costs to threaten humans." "We will," Jake promised. The boarding team climbed into the container. The interior was cramped and dark, barely enough room for 6 people in their combat armor. They strapped themselves into the crash couches and Sam sealed the hatch from the outside. Jake's radio crackled. "Captain, this is Sam. The launch sequence is programmed. The mass driver will fire automatically in 60 seconds. Good luck, sir." "Thank you, Mr. Porter. Take care of our people." The countdown began. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. Beside him, he could hear Danny breathing heavily. and Amy was whispering a prayer under her breath. Nicole's face was set in calm determination, and Pete was checking his explosives one last time. 10 seconds, 5, 3, 2, 1. The mass driver fired. The acceleration was beyond anything Jake had experienced. It felt like a giant hand was crushing him into his seat. His vision tunneled, blood rushing away from his head. He tried to breathe and could not. His ribs felt like they were cracking under the pressure. Then they were in space and the pressure was gone. Jake gasped for air, his whole body shaking. Beside him, Amy was unconscious, blood trickling from her nose. Kevin was not moving at all. Sound off, Jake managed to say. Alive, Nicole reported. Barely, Danny groaned. I'm okay, Pete said, though his voice was strained. Kevin did not respond. Jake unstrapped and floated over to check him. The tech specialist was dead, his neck broken by the G-forces despite the crash couch. Jake closed Kevin's eyes and strapped him back in. They would honor him later if there was a later. Amy woke up a few minutes after that, confused and sick but alive. That left 5 of them, 5 soldiers against an entire warship. Through the small viewport, Jake could see the Vrix flagship growing larger. It was a massive vessel, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and armor. Their cargo container was on a collision course with the hull, and there was nothing they could do now but hold on and hope. The impact was brutal. The container smashed into the flagship's hull with enough force to tear a hole through the outer armor. Alarms blared inside the ship and Jake could hear the hiss of escaping atmosphere. Move, Jake shouted. Before they seal this section. The boarding team poured out of the wrecked container, weapons up and ready. They were in some kind of storage bay, and Vrix warriors were already responding to the breach. Jake shot the first one through the head, then the second. Pete threw a grenade that detonated in a flash of light and shrapnel. They fought their way deeper into the ship, following Nicole's map toward the reactor control room. Every meter was contested. Vrix warriors poured out of side corridors, and the humans had to fight through them all. Amy went down with a plasma bolt to the leg, but Danny dragged her along, firing one-handed while supporting her with his other arm. They reached the reactor control room to find it defended by Warcloth X himself and his honor guard. The Vrix commander stood 2 heads taller than Jake and carried a plasma blade that glowed with lethal energy. You dare board my ship? Thex roared. You dare? The escape pod screamed through the atmosphere like a meteor, shaking so violently that Jake was sure it would break apart at any second. He was strapped into a seat that was not designed for humans, surrounded by Vrix controls he could not read. Through the small viewport, he could see the clouds rushing past and the ground getting closer much too fast. Brace for impact, he shouted, but his words were lost in the roar of atmospheric entry. The pod hit the ground hard enough to throw everyone against their restraints. Metal screeched and buckled. Something exploded in the rear compartment, filling the air with acrid smoke. Then everything went still, and for a moment Jake thought he might actually be dead. Everyone alive? He asked, coughing from the smoke. Define alive, Danny groaned from somewhere to his left. I think I broke every rib on my right side. I'm okay, Nicole said, though her voice was tight with pain. Amy's unconscious but breathing. Pete's not moving. Jake unbuckled himself and crawled over to Pete. The demolitions expert was slumped in his seat, his neck bent at an angle that told Jake everything he needed to know. Pete had survived the boarding action, survived the explosion only to die in the crash landing. Jake closed his friend's eyes and said a silent prayer. We need to move, Nicole said. If the Vrix have any ground forces still active, they'll be looking for this pod. She was right. Jake forced himself to his feet, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. He helped Danny up and together they carried the unconscious Amy out of the wrecked pod. They were in a forest about 50 kilometers from the colony, surrounded by tall trees that looked almost like earth pines, but with purple bark. Which way? Danny asked. Jake looked at the sun, getting his bearings. East. We walk until we reach the colony or until someone finds us. They walked for hours. Jake's body wanted to shut down, wanted to just lie down and sleep forever, but he kept moving. Amy woke up after a while and was able to walk with support. Danny moved slowly, his broken ribs making every breath painful. Nicole scouted ahead, her rifle ready despite her exhaustion. They reached the colony as the sun was setting. Jake saw the mining complex in the distance and felt relief wash over him. They had made it. Against all odds, they had actually made it. A figure appeared on the ridge ahead, silhouetted against the sunset. Jake raised his rifle instinctively, then lowered it as he recognized Lisa. The medic was standing there with tears streaming down her face, and behind her were dozens of civilians and soldiers, all staring at the survivors in disbelief. "You're alive," Lisa said, her voice breaking. "Dear God, you're actually alive." Jake wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment. Instead, he just said, "We need a medic. Danny's hurt, Amy's hurt, and I think I might be dying." Then his legs gave out and he collapsed. Strong hands caught him before he hit the ground, and he heard voices calling for medical help. He let himself drift, knowing that for the first time in days he could rest. The mission was complete. The colony was safe. He woke up 3 days later in an actual medical bed with clean sheets and an IV in his arm. Lisa was sitting beside him reading something on a tablet. She looked up as he stirred and smiled. "Welcome back, Captain. You've been out for 72 hours. Your body basically shut down from exhaustion and injury." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. "The others? Danny's going to be fine. Broken ribs, but they'll heal. Amy lost her leg below the knee from that plasma wound, but she's alive and in good spirits. Nicole has a concussion and some nasty burns, but she's already back on her feet and driving everyone crazy with her energy. Helen?" Lisa's smile faded slightly. "She made it. The main fleet arrived yesterday morning with a proper medical ship. They stabilized her and a dozen other critically wounded civilians." "She's going to live. The main fleet is here?" Jake asked, surprised. "Full battle group. 3 cruisers, 2 destroyers, and a carrier. They arrived ready for a fight and found..." Lisa gestured around. "This a colony defended by less than 40 soldiers against an entire Vrix invasion force. You're heroes, Captain. All of you." Jake did not feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had watched too many good people die. "How many did we lose in total?" 30 soldiers killed in action. 42 civilians dead from the fighting and bombardment. Hundreds more wounded. Lisa's voice was quiet. "But 3,000 people are alive because of what you did. 3,000 people who would have been enslaved or killed if you hadn't dropped out of the sky when they needed you most." Before Jake could respond, the door opened and a woman in an admiral's uniform walked in. She was in her 60s with gray hair cut short and the kind of face that had seen too many wars. Lisa stood at attention and Jake tried to do the same, but the admiral waved him back down. "At ease, Captain Morrison. I'm Admiral Patricia Cole, commanding the 3rd Fleet. I wanted to meet the man who held off a Vrix invasion force with just 63 soldiers. We didn't do it alone, Admiral. The civilians fought alongside us. Helen Brooks, Gordon Hayes, and dozens of others gave their lives defending this place. I've read the reports. You boarded a Vrix capital ship in a cargo container and killed their commander in single combat. That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard or the most insane." "Probably both, ma'am." Admiral Cole smiled slightly. "Probably. Captain, what you did here has changed everything. The Vrix have been expanding aggressively for the past 5 years, conquering colony after colony because they believed humans were weak. You proved them wrong. Since word got out about Kepler 442, 12 other colonies have successfully defended themselves against Vrix attacks. The Vrix Dominion has recalled their invasion fleets to reassess their strategy." Jake took that in. 12 colonies saved. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of lives preserved because his battalion had decided to do the impossible. It was a strange feeling. "There's something else," the Admiral continued. "Command is creating a new rapid response force, a dedicated unit that can deploy to threatened colonies faster than the main fleet. Ships with better engines, soldiers with better equipment, and the authority to act immediately when distress calls come in. We want you to command it." "Me, ma'am? You've proven you can make the hard decisions and get results. You've proven you care about civilians, not just winning battles. That's exactly what this unit needs. Of course, if you'd prefer a desk job on Earth, I can arrange that too. You've earned a rest." Jake thought about Earth, about safety and comfort and never having to watch soldiers die under his command again. It was tempting. But he also thought about other colonies out there, other administrators like Helen Brooks who might send desperate distress calls thinking no one would come. "I'll take the command, Admiral, but I have one condition. Name it. Any soldier who survived Kepler 442 and wants to join this new unit gets a spot. They've earned it, and I want people I can trust beside me." "Done. You've got your unit, Captain." Admiral Cole extended her hand and Jake shook it. "Welcome to Rapid Response Command." 6 months later, Jake stood in front of a memorial wall that had been built near the mining complex. The wall was made of black stone and had the names of every soldier and civilian who had died defending Kepler 442 carved into it. He touched Gordon Hayes's name, then Helen Brooks. No, Helen had survived. Her name was not on the wall. She was recovering on Earth, last he heard. The colony had been rebuilt and reinforced. New defensive systems, a small garrison of Marines, and regular supply runs from Earth. The colonists were safe now, truly safe, and they had named their main street after the 7th Rapid Response Battalion. Nicole approached, walking with only a slight limp. "The new ship is ready, sir." The RRS Defender. "She's fast, well-armed, and has the best drop pod system in the fleet. We can reach any colony in the sector within 3 days." "Good. How many soldiers did we get?" 240, including everyone from Kepler 442 who could still fight. Danny signed on as your sergeant major. Lisa's our chief medical officer. Amy's heading up the tech division, cybernetic leg and all. She says it's an improvement over the original. Jake smiled slightly. "And you're my executive officer if you're still interested." "I wouldn't miss it for anything, sir." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the names on the wall. Jake thought about each person listed there. The soldiers who had dropped from the sky knowing they might not survive. The civilians who had taken up arms to defend their homes. The engineers and administrators who had sacrificed themselves so others could live. "Do you think we made a difference?" Nicole asked quietly. "We saved 3,000 people. We inspired 12 colonies to stand up for themselves. We showed the Vrix that humans aren't easy prey." Jake turned away from the memorial wall. "Yes, Lieutenant. We made a difference. And we're going to keep making a difference. Every time someone sends out a distress call thinking no one will come." 2 weeks later, the RRS Defender was on patrol in the frontier sectors when a distress call came through. A colony called New Aberdeen was under attack by pirates, over 1,000 raiders hitting a settlement of 5,000 civilians. The local militia was outnumbered and outgunned. They needed help, but the nearest fleet unit was 10 days away. The call ended with the colony administrator saying words that Jake had